really big and you're in a grinding season, then sometimes you do have to just grind through. But if you're consistently finding yourself there, it's time to examine why. And that's some of my notes that I have written.
Yeah,
here. It's like, how did you end up here? I think is a good place to stop and really ask yourself.
I think that's a book by somebody. How did I end up here?
How did you get here, right?
Yeah.
So examine why are you in that survival mode versus in the thriving mode, right? And there's usually a couple of reasons. So we just, number one, very simple, very obvious, we've just overscheduled our stuff ourselves. And we've said yes too many times and
yes,
not enough, right?
Yes.
Maybe we're there because we're not choosing to do enough of the right things. Maybe it's not simply a quantity issue. It's just that the things that we are doing are draining us. We're not tuned into who we are. We're not aware of how we're wired, how we recharge, some of our personality and coping mechanisms like Enneagram strengths. And we're ending up doing too much of the stuff that drains us. Right. Or maybe, like I said earlier, it's just a grind period. So we all get in those seasons where it's like, okay, the reward is worth what I'm going through. And I do have to get to this end point before my life will, quote unquote, return to normal.
Right.
But like you said, we're not going to let everything go. You've also got to temper it. You've got to adjust your timeline so you can still have that time for a coffee with your husband, time with, go shopping with your friend, connection, self-care. You've got to exercise. It shouldn't be all or nothing.
Right. That's where I got myself to. I was just like, I just got to put my head down. I can't do anything else but this. And I just got to get through to May. And then I can breathe again. And that's like, no, you have to, because that's the surefire recipe for burnout. And that's what I was speaking to them is I did that when Karen passed away and we moved Mimi here, which we've talked in previous episodes about Ken's grandmother, and we became her primary caretakers. And I ended up getting myself really sick because you get into that, like your body just does what it needs to do to get through. It gets into survival mode and you just push, and your cortisol's up here and you're going and going and going. And then when all that slows down, you fall apart. And that's what I was afraid of, because I have a tendency to anxiety that I was like going to get myself right back where I started. I was just feeling such a sense of that. And they were like, you have to live your life in the midst of it. It can't be all or nothing.
Well, yeah, it comes down to stress management in that situation, right? Because we're not getting any younger and most of us are in perimenopause. So our ovaries aren't making estrogen. So our adrenals are taking on that task.
Yeah.
Our adrenals are our stress glands. So if we're constantly, pumping out adrenaline and cortisol, because we're stressed, it's not going to have resources left over to balance and make the right amount of hormone. And so you're going to get, we wonder why, it's the perfect storm, right? And then all of a sudden when you're going through a stressful period, then that's when menopause,
things blow up.
I'm
actually so glad that you mentioned that, because I think that's another thing that we can have a tendency to do. We expect ourselves to be able to do and also recover from what we used to do maybe in our 30s, and our bodies, maybe we just don't have the energy capacity for it. And that's okay. That doesn't make us weak or anything wrong, but we have to be a little more gentle with ourselves.
I know that's a tough one to accept. That's a tough pill to swallow, right? Because
it is.
Part of me wants to resist that, like, mentality of getting older. Like part of me feels
you don't
like
want to go too far the other end,
right, and baby yourself or ginger yourself too much, because I do think that, like, then if you adopt that mindset, then pretty soon you're like, going to bed at 7 o'clock.
I know,
which I do.
That could be. I was going to say you can do that.
No, but I think
I think it's going down a slippery slope. And I know that when I'm coming out on the other side of this, and by the time this airs, I'm going to be pretty well out of it. But I was saying, like, I just can't, like, I'm not sleeping, because I wasn't. Everything was about, I'm not sleeping, I'm this, I'm that. And you're like, you're going to be fine. Like, suck it up. You're strong enough, and you can get through it. Because you know me well enough to know that I start to baby myself or worry. But so there is a fine line of, like, listening to your body and knowing when maybe it's too much in the season, but also pushing yourself, because you probably can do more than you expect that you can.
Yes, it's both.
It is.
It's both.
It's not an either or. It can be a both and.
No. And I mean, symptoms will tell you. So if you have a lot of physical symptoms that are alarm signals, then you need to pay attention to that. And there's probably something urgent you need to do. But if you're not having symptoms, if it's quote unquote run of the mill stuff, like not sleeping, stress management stuff, then again, we just have to remember that we can't control the stress coming at us, but we can control our reaction to how that stress. And that's what we've got to get a little better at. And this is a beautiful time for that, because we do have a little bit more free time. And it's kind of like, I feel like in my life, it's like now more than ever, I felt like, okay, you've got to master this. You've got to not let things get to you, and you can't let them get you so worked up. And I do think just age and maturity and wisdom brings you to that place passively, don't you think? But
I do.
But I do think there's some things you can do actively and just in like practice, and saying, okay, I'm going to breathe. I'm not going to get into that shallow breathing place. I am going to go to bed a half hour earlier because I know that I'm hitting some stress right now.
Right.
I am going to stop and drink water. You're going to love yourself enough to do these little baby steps, the simple things that are very loving. And, and I think sometimes we can get in a place of like self-punishment, right? So that's what we've talked about here.
For sure.
Yeah, when we don't have enough focus on you. So that's another reason you can get into this place is you don't have good boundaries, and you're just saying, same with the scheduling, you're doing too much. You're trying to be all things to all people without any focus back on yourself. You can be very, very selfless as a person and as a mom, and we've talked about that. And at the same time, give that same love back to you, to yourself. Right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. You're only as good to others as you are to yourself. So we can definitely, when we're burning the candle at both ends, it's not a great thing. And I think to your point, to go back to where you said about the experience, like you're at an age like you really feel like now, like that's a non-negotiable. You have to make the time to let things roll off you a little more easy, or take the time to breathe, or know that it's going to be there. What I think the lesson that I'm learning is that I've always lived my life with like, just suck it up, power through. You can do it. When you get to this date or when you get to the other side of it, then you'll relax. But guess what I found? The next thing is coming down the pipe. So if you're constantly living in the get to, you're always going to be living in the get to. You're never, newsflash, like likely you're never getting to the place where you're just going to go, oh, yeah, it's zen. I'm under the tree and I'm relaxing and enjoying everything. I don't want to necessarily live my life like that anyway. I'd be bored out of my mind. But my point is, and I think this is what you're saying, is like, how do we in the midst of that still find moments, make sure that we're being present, make sure we're enjoying the ride, enjoying the work.
It's the goal. So it's the goal to chase the carrot, right? And so if you're always doing that, you'll be so perpetually frustrated because it'll always move, right? It's kind of like me with our practice, and for years, dealing with a team and people that work with you and for you is sometimes more difficult than delivering a service or a product to the community, right? I think that piece many business owners will relate.
Agree. Mm-hmm.
And I think for years, I thought the same thing. If I could just get this person in this role and we could get that just right, and if we could just get to there, well, lo and behold, something else comes along. And so it's an acceptance. It's really just a reframing of, okay, we're not chasing a carrot. We're seeing that life is this big, complicated, messy balancing act. And how are we balancing in amongst all of it? Like, how are we showing up inside of that? Because it's not going to go perfect. It's like, just come to terms with, it's never going to be finished. It's never going to be perfect.
Yeah.
But what is your day to day? And that's what we talk about so much, about creating those emotions that you want more of in life, because all of that storm and all of that chaos and all of that stuff is happening and it's coming down the pipe, like you said. So in the midst of all of that, what is your experience? And you get to try on different lenses. That's what our mindset is all about, right? We can reframe that. We can try on different ways of looking at the world.
Yes.
And
different
that's
ways of
how-
viewing your situation.
Exactly. And that's how we can change inside of the same situation.